Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 1 discussion. Welcome to day 15 of Teaser season for patch 3.27 and the Keepers of the Flame expansion. Today, I want to keep this one quite short. I'm just feeling a bit under the weather and I want to get rested properly before League start in a couple of days' time. Renegade Games put out a teaser video for the new skill, Somatic Shell. This is an intriguing one. What this is a wand attack skill, but it's somewhat delayed damage, but it's not delayed damage with any normal mechanics behind it. Instead, this is very much intended as a 1-2 punch. At least that's the way that I'm interpreting it. You hit an enemy with Somatic Shell, it does a small amount of immediate damage, and then there is a delayed amount of additional damage that's put on that monster. That damage is only delivered when the shell breaks. How do you break the shell? By dealing damage with other skills. The thing that makes this skill potentially quite interesting though is that it is contagious. When an enemy shell is popped, it actually fires out additional projectiles that will then seek out other enemies nearby. Now, my interpretation of this, and I could be wrong on this, my interpretation is that enemies that you directly hit, they become contagious, but then enemies that are hit by secondary projectiles from Somatic Shell exploding, those are not contagious. So you can think of this as a propagating calamity through a wave of enemies, but it's a calamity that requires other hits in order to actually propagate. This is most certainly not going to fit in every playstyle. This is going to be one of those skills that I think most players will look at and say, yeah, you know what, that's not for me. But honestly, I think it's really cool that there is something like this, especially given that when we have a look at the patch note changes, you'll see that some other wand skills that have more universal playstyles ended up getting plus 13.33% extra damage. More on that in a sec. The second piece of information today was the Keepers of the Flame item filter information. Now, how much attention do you need to pay to this, you might be asking? The answer is absolutely none if you use a third-party tool to generate a loot filter. So if you use an unmodified NeverSync loot filter, or if you use FilterBlade to customize a loot filter, then this information is not really aimed at you. This is intended for power gamers that design their own filter from the ground up, or for community tool producers. But there is some information that's placed in here that is the first time that we've got it, that relates to gameplay as well, and that is all the tiers of the maps. So first up we have the new keywords section. These are major toggles that you can use to modify the way your loot filter works, and you can turn on or off Valborn uniques, you can make them show up differently, any of those sorts of things. That's the purpose of this keyword. Next, in the new item section, we have a list of new items that are stackable currency, and so there's augmentation implants, regal implants, exalted implants, unstable implants, Valborn orbs of augmentation, regal and exalted orbs. All of these were teased in the day 10 livestream. There are the new skill gems and new support gems, nothing new there. In the new map fragment section, there is the Hive Brain Gland, which is new, and then I'm sure that you can probably guess what the Traumatic Fragment, Reverent Fragment, Lonely Reliquary Key, Reverent Reliquary Key, and Traumatic Reliquary Key might be related to if you're familiar with 3.26's new Pinnacle bosses, and that 3.27 is introducing Uber versions of each. In the graphs, we have all of the names of the different graphs. And then in the womb gift section, we have something that's perhaps a little bit more impactful. Now, here we need to talk about a video that was put out just as I was flicking my day 14 video to live yesterday, and that was ZiggyD's video. He was able to play the new version of 3.27, was able to play a test version actually at Renegade Games' office in Auckland, and he was able to give some thoughts of it and some recorded footage, but only from the early acts. So he was able to play up to the end of Act 4 or so. Now, while he was doing that, he was able to mess around with a bunch of the new skills, mostly focused his video on the new breach content. But also, he does talk a little bit about the details of the way that these womb gifts work. You can turn these into new items through the use of the Genesis tree, the new item generation tech that's added in this league. And this had a lot in common with Necropolis crafting, but minus the clunk of having to find a whole bunch of different corpses. It's actually less powerful in Necropolis crafting, but it does look very, very powerful. Now, the key things you need to know about this. There are a couple of nodes on this that cause you to have very, very lucky rolls when it comes to the number of sockets on items and the number of link sockets on items. And if you allocate all of these, you get to roll 161 times and keep the best roll. What does this mean when it comes to getting 6 sockets on an item? Well, the odds of getting 6 sockets on an item have been data mined as 1 in 306. So if you roll 161 times, you might think it's 161 over 306. It's actually not quite that favorable because sometimes when you roll 161 times, you get 2 or even 3 6-socket items. So it's actually a little bit less than that, but it is just a sliver above 40%. That at least one of the items that you get will be 6-socketed. Once it is 6-socketed, we're actually not able to data mine the odds of getting a 6 link, but based upon information that's bounced around the Path of Exile community, it's probably something of the order 1 in 1250, 1 in 1300 for a 0 quality item to hit 6 links with a single orb of fusing. And based on that, we're looking at something of the order 12% that you win that next step, which is getting a full 6 link at that point. So you're looking at basically 5% or so to get a 6 link every time that you run one of these womb gifts, assuming the womb gift is high enough in level that a 6 link is an option, which comes online at item level 50. What this means is that a video that I had been planning on the best ways to get your 6 links in patch 3.27 is probably actually not going to come out this league. Why is that? Because ultimately the best way is probably going to be through using these new womb gifts. So that's the womb gifts, but these are the 5 new ones that exist. After that, we have the names of the 6 new types of rings: cryonic rings, enthalpic rings, synaptic rings, organic rings, fugitive rings, and formless rings. The new wands, I think this was already known: somatic wand, blasting wand, kinetic wand. And then we have something completely new, which is the 5 divination cards. Unfortunately, nothing is clarified about what these divination cards are. We've got the Last Laugh, the Lake, One Last Score, Bound by Flame, and Outfoxed. We shall find out what those are at a later point. After this, renamed items. Pay attention to this if you play hardcore. If you don't play hardcore, you can skip this. Removed items: Bestiary Orb, Carved Wand, Engraved Wand, Imbued Wand. These are being replaced. Bestiary Orb with just nothing. You don't need anything anymore. And Carved Wand, Engraved Wand, Imbued Wand with the Somatic Wand and its higher level variants. Then we come to the map tiers. Now, we could go through everything when it comes to the map tiers. The first draft of this video that I did actually did that, and it was way too long. Instead, I just want to point out a couple of highlights. If you like low tier farming strategies, tier 2 gives you dunes and gives you chocolate sewer. If you don't like those maps, you've got tier 3 strand. And tier 3 strand is interesting because the tier 6 version of it, which is 1 Voidstone, is high enough in level to work pretty well with a few different strategies. So 1 Voidstone strand and also 1 Voidstone canyon are some good options for low tier strategies that might work at tier 6. After that, we have Mesa at tier 4, Atoll at tier 5, which is kind of anchored there because it's got to be adjacent to one of the limited places on the Atlas that can manage a unique map. Then we have a bunch of mediocre and reasonable maps at 6, nothing terrible, but nothing fantastic. And we keep going down until we get to the next really important ones. So, Acid Caverns, tier 11. This is one of the most dangerous maps around. Keep it in mind. This is a horrible map boss, one that is definitely going to be a major milestone of progression if you're playing in hardcore. Likewise, we have Crimson Township sitting at tier 12 and Burial Chamber at tier 13. These are the 3 hardest map bosses on the entire Atlas, so you know where they are. After that, tier 16, we have the natural tier 16s this league are going to be Ivory Temple, awesome divination cards, terrible layout, at least if the divination cards stay the same. Then we have Beach, then we have Forking River and Wasteland. Forking River and Wasteland are in my 10 or 20 least favourite maps of all time. Beach, however, is perfectly fine. One more I want to point out as well, a very good divination card used to exist in Cells. I'm not saying for certain that Cells is going to have the divination card, the Chains that Bind, but if you're not able to get yourself a 6 link out of the new Breach mechanic, then Cells might be the way to go if that divination card returns to Cells. But we haven't had Cells on the Atlas for a little while, so we shall see if that is indeed where it drops. After that, the tier 17s, of course, are unchanged. So that is what's contained inside the information for item filter builders. Next, let's jump over to the patch notes because there are some patch note changes. Firstly, Granny Gear Games have decided that some of the shrine shenanigans that have been going on need to change a little bit. Syncretism and other Atlas passive skills granting either shrine buff effect or shrine duration now only grant these benefits to shrines activated from within maps. I think this is not intended as a nerf to Blunderbore. Yes, it is a nerf to Blunderbore. Blunderbore is a worse item in 3.27 than it was in 3.26 as a direct result of these changes, but I think the intention that they're going for here is that it means they can do more and different things with shrines in the future. Most notably, I think this is actually linked to the changes that they have made in the redesign of the Evolving Shrine. I think they were concerned that Domination Scarab of Evolution, that this is intended primarily as a nerf, but also as just a change of how it works. But this package was potentially going to be really explosive in conjunction with Syncretism, but Making this change to Syncretism now means they're able to then design shrines that couldn't exist otherwise. Tweak the description of the Blightspawn Atlas passive to clarify that Blight bosses add the additional reward chest to the lane they're from, which is visible at the start of the Blight encounter, rather than the chest spawning when they're defeated. Now this is purely a description change, so this is one of those cases where they're saying, okay, players have been misinterpreting this, we're going to fix the description so that it is more clear what we're talking about. And speaking about clarifications, we'll have a little bit more of that when we come to the FAQ. Now we get to the section where they give 13 to 15% to various wand skills. So, Barrage. Barrage got plus 15%. Barrage of Volley Fire, plus 15%. Kinetic Blast of Clustering. This got plus 13 and a third percent to its mana scaling. Kinetic Bolt of Fragmentation. I'm not doing the maths on this one. This gained 2/17, so that's something of the order 13% as well. Not sure of the exact amount. And it also gained the ability for projectiles to change direction 3 times rather than 2, which would increase this skill's screen coverage. So all in all, a lot of buffs to various wand skills that were unused. Shrine buffs granted by the Harmony of Purpose Ascendancy passive skill now have a base duration of 20 seconds, previously 10. Hey, looks like the nerfs that they did to Syncretism do have some other flow-on benefits as well. The fact that they've gone and nerfed Syncretism here means that they can go and buff shrine buffs from the Harmony of Purpose skill, and also potentially shrines that come from other, more esoteric sources. The Command of the Pit unique gloves. These have been redesigned. They used to have a mod on them that read that when you socket a Ghastly Eye Jewel, minions gain plus 1000 accuracy. Now previously they had not worked out what they were going to do with this, and with the removal of minion accuracy, they're now changing this so that when they have a Ghastly Eye Jewel socketed, minions have a 25% chance to gain Unholy Might on hit with spells. This is only going to apply to new versions. Old versions will become legacy. Now, Unholy Might is one of those interesting buffs that is kind of tricky to use because it requires you to scale things in different ways, especially when you don't have it all the time. But it converts 100% of physical damage into chaos. It also causes you to wither on hit. This is at its absolute best when your minions are attacking really, really fast, but they need to occasionally cast spells as well. So this is one of those things where there's definitely some power on this new change with Command of the Pit, but most minion builds gain nothing from this. A small number of minion builds will definitely exist that can make good use out of this. Fix the bug where modifiers to shrine effects from items were applying twice to shrines that were granted by Harmony of Purpose. That's the Guardian Ascendancy skill again. So essentially, this one, although it is overall getting buffed, some of the best use cases for it are not getting changed. Now in the updated patch notes, we have something that is interesting. Kinetic Rain, when ZiggyD was playing around with it, it was absolutely bonkers OP. It has been nerfed a little bit from when he was first playtesting it, but it is also coming online later in the game. This is now something you can only get when you kill Gravicius in Act 3. So it is a late Act 3 gem, rather than previously being a late Act 1 gem, and its low gem level stats will change as a result of this. There was also the case there was some discussion that the initial hit aspect of this is going to be nerfed, and the delayed aspect of it is going to be buffed. We shall see the exact gem numbers tomorrow. Finally, Thunderstorm, which is one of the new supports, this is now being moved to General Gravicius as well. And importantly, only Rangers, Duelists, Shadow, and Scion can reasonably easily get this. Otherwise, I guess you're off to the library, or you're living without it until Act 6. Finally, we have the Keepers of the Flame FAQ. There have been a small number of questions that have been updated here, including one that I asked yesterday. So, what will it cost to respec points in the Genesis tree? This is the Breach item creation tree. The answer is nothing. Doing so is free. Will I be able to hide my graphs if they conflict with the MTX I want to wear? Yes, you will be able to do this, but there are no promises that it will be available on day one. What's happening with the classic Breach uniques, Zoph's Blood, Red Nightmare, etc., etc.? They still exist. You'll be able to grow them on the Genesis tree, or in some cases they will come from Breach-related bosses. Many of these will have Foulborn variants to check out as well. And probably most importantly here, for the purposes of schizophrenic dissociation, do jewels socketed in a cluster jewel count as being socketed in your passive tree? The answer here is yes. I asked this yesterday because my intuitive response was yes, they will, but I wasn't 100% certain, and I could see the case for an answer of no. Well, now we have an authoritative answer. Schizophrenic dissociation has the weaker of the two possible interpretations, which means that it goes from an S++ tier node down to something that is instead still very good, but that will not fit every build, which honestly is where I would like it to be. It's something that you can spec into if you're playing a life build, but you will pay quite a price for doing so. And whether or not that's worth your while, well, that's up to you to decide. Anyway, that is everything that we've got for today. There was also a leak that came out today, but it was pretty small. And I have a policy of only putting leaks into their own videos so that people that aren't interested in being exposed to leaks don't see them. And honestly, this was at the very small end, which means that it's not really worth doing its own video on at the moment. If there are more leaks in the future, I will put out videos on them, but they will be clearly marked as being about leaks. So if you're one of the people that prefers to just find things out when grinding your games intended you to, then you won't be exposed to them by surprise. I am going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have the results you deserve.